The King's Gaze. The great hall of Stonehaven pulsed with an anticipation thick enough to taste. Chandeliers, heavy with countless crystals, spilled a golden light onto the polished obsidian floor, reflecting the nervous shimmer of silk gowns and the glint of polished armor worn by guards lining the perimeter. A low murmur, like the hum of a distant beehive, filled the space, punctuated by the rustle of fabrics and the hushed whispers of the gathered nobility. Alpha King Theron, tall and imposing even in his formal attire of deep forest green, strode through the grand archway. His presence alone seemed to quiet the room, the collective breath of the assembly catching in their throats. He moved with the effortless grace of a predator, his gaze sweeping over the assembled ladies, each vying for his attention, each a carefully curated masterpiece of beauty and lineage. His eyes, the colour of ancient slate, lingered on none of them, not truly. He saw the calculated smiles, the practiced curtsies, the carefully orchestrated displays of demure elegance. Yet something felt hollow. His instincts, usually a roaring fire within him, were strangely muted, observing rather than engaging. His duty was clear. Choose a Luna to strengthen his reign, to secure alliances, to provide an heir. It was a transaction, albeit a grand one, and his heart remained stubbornly uninvolved. Then, at the edge of his periphery, near a towering marble pillar, a flicker of movement caught his attention. A young woman, barely more than a girl, was attempting to blend into the shadows. A silver serving tray clutched in her hands. Her simple tunic and linen apron marked her as a servant, yet her posture held a quiet dignity that belied her station. Her hair, the colour of rich earth, was pulled back in a practical braid, and her eyes, when they briefly met his, were wide and startled, like a fawn caught in a sudden beam of light. They were a deep, clear brown, holding no artifice, only a fleeting curiosity and a touch of fear. Ilara. Her name, unbidden, formed in his mind. He'd seen her before, a fleeting presence in the castle's bustling corridors, always diligently at work, always fading into the background. A sharp cough from his advisor, Lord Gareth, pulled him back. Theron's jaw tightened. This was not the time for distractions. He forced his gaze away from Ilara, who had now lowered her head, her cheeks a faint rose. He scanned the noblewomen once more, his mind sifting through the dossiers he'd memorized. Lady Seraphina, daughter of the powerful Duke Valerius, stood out. Her beauty was undeniable, her crimson gown a testament to her family's wealth, her dark hair coiled into an intricate masterpiece. She radiated confidence, a regal bearing that matched his own. Her intellect was renowned, her wit sharp. She would be a formidable Luna, a queen who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him in matters of state. He took a deep breath, the decision feeling like a heavy cloak settling on his shoulders. This was the logical choice, the expected choice, the choice that would bring stability to his kingdom. Lady Seraphina, his voice boomed, resonating through the suddenly silent hall. Step forward. A collective sigh, a mix of relief and disappointment, swept through the room. Seraphina, a triumphant smile gracing her lips, glided forward, her eyes never leaving Theron's. She bowed with exquisite grace, her movements fluid and practiced. He extended a hand, and she placed her own, soft and delicate, into his. The crowd erupted in polite applause, a wave of congratulations washing over them. As Seraphina's hand rested in his, her touch felt cool, almost detached. He offered her a polite, kingly smile, but his eyes, despite his best efforts, flickered back to the pillar. Ilara was gone. The space she had occupied was empty. The shadows now truly empty. A strange, unsettling pang resonated deep within him. It was a fleeting sensation, a whisper of an instinct he couldn't quite grasp, but it was there, a dissonant note in the triumphant symphony of his selection. He had made his choice, fulfilled his duty. Yet, as he turned to acknowledge the cheers, a quiet doubt, like a persistent pebble in his boot, had already begun to form. Beneath the surface, the palace, usually a bastion of quiet order, now buzzed with the frantic energy of preparation. Yards of silk and velvet arrived daily, scenting the air with their luxurious newness. Jewelers from the northern mountains unpacked their shimmering wares in the grand hall, their hushed consultations echoing through the ancient stone. Theron observed it all from a detached distance, the flurry of activity a backdrop to the quiet hum of his own unease. Seraphina moved through this new landscape like a queen already crowned. Her laughter, a melodic cascade, drifted from drawing rooms and courtyards, captivating courtiers and servants alike. She charmed with effortless grace, her eyes sparkling with feigned humility as she accepted congratulations. "Such an honor," she'd murmur, her hand resting delicately on the arm of a grizzled elder. "To serve such a magnificent pack." Theron watched her, a knot forming in his stomach. Her public persona was flawless, a masterpiece of cultivated charm. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, a flicker of something colder, sharper, would cross her features. A fleeting expression of disdain, quickly masked. He saw it in the way she dismissed a minor noble with a curt nod, or the almost imperceptible curl of her lip when a seamstress stammered over a measurement. He often found himself gravitating towards his study, a sanctuary of leather-bound books and hushed silence. It was there, amidst the scent of aged parchment and beeswax, that a strange comfort settled upon him. He'd begun to notice Alara. She wasn't always present, but more often than not, he'd glimpse her, a fleeting shadow in the periphery of his vision. Sometimes she'd be dusting a distant shelf in the corridor, her movements soft and efficient. Other times he'd hear the gentle swish of her skirt as she passed by the study door, carrying a stack of fresh linens. Her presence was like a quiet anchor, a subtle balm to the disquiet Seraphina stirred within him. He never spoke to her, not directly, not since that brief, charged moment during the selection. But the quietude she exuded, the almost imperceptible grace in her tasks, resonated with a part of him he hadn't realized was aching for peace. One afternoon, a sudden, sharp voice cut through the palace's busy hum. Theron, on his way to the armory, paused, recognizing Seraphina's tone. It was not the honeyed melody she used for public consumption. This was steel, thinly veiled impatience. He rounded a corner, just out of sight, and saw her by a side entrance, her face tight with annoyance. A young guard, barely older than a pup, stood rigidly before her, his head bowed. "Are you deaf, boy?" Seraphina snapped, her voice low but laced with venom. "I said I needed the carriage brought around now. Not in 5 minutes, not when you finished your idle chatter. Now. Do you understand the meaning of urgency, or must I explain it in terms even a stable hand could comprehend?" The guard stammered. "My apologies, Lady Seraphina. I was informed the Alpha King had—" "The Alpha King," she interrupted, her eyes narrowing, "has more important matters to attend to than my immediate transport. Your loyalty is to me now, boy. Do not forget it." Her gaze raked over him, a cruel assessment. "Now, move, unless you wish to find yourself scrubbing the latrines for the rest of your pathetic life." The guard flushed, his face a mask of humiliation, and practically sprinted away. Seraphina watched him go, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips before her features smoothed, resuming their usual serene mask. She turned, her gaze sweeping the empty corridor, and Theron quickly stepped back, unseen. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones. The casual cruelty, the cutting dismissal, it was a stark contrast to the benevolent future Luna she presented to the world. A chill that had nothing to do with the brisk autumn air settled over him. He had chosen her for her strength, her lineage, her undeniable beauty. But beneath the surface, a different woman lurked, and Theron was beginning to fear what he had truly unleashed upon his pack. The quiet comfort Elara offered suddenly felt not just appealing, but vital. Whispers of danger, the clatter of ceramic shattering against ancient stone, echoed through the otherwise hushed corridor, making Theron flinch. He'd been passing the Grand Salon on his way to a strategy meeting when the sound ripped through the quiet. A moment later, a hushed gasp followed by a low murmur of concern drifted from the doorway. Peeking in, he saw Elara, her usually pristine apron now splattered with what looked like herbal tea, shards of a delicate porcelain teacup scattered around her feet. Her hand, still clutching the silver tray, trembled slightly. A maid rushed to her side, offering a sympathetic hand. It was the third such incident this week. First, a heavy tapestry rod had inexplicably dislodged from the wall just as Elara passed beneath it, narrowly missing her head. Then, a supposedly stable stack of freshly laundered linens had toppled, burying her in a cloud of white fabric and nearly sending her tumbling down the grand staircase. Now this. Now. Each time, Theron had been close enough to witness the aftermath. The subtle tremor in Elara's usually steady hands, the fleeting look of confusion in her eyes. He watched as Seraphina, who had been conversing with a minor lord near the hearth, turned at the sound. Her lips, painted a vibrant berry red, curved into a brief, almost imperceptible smile, a flicker of amusement that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by an expression of polite concern. But Theron had seen it. The quick, cold satisfaction in her eyes. A shiver, not of cold, but of unease, traced its way down his spine. Later that evening, as Theron walked Seraphina back to her chambers, he found himself scrutinizing her with new eyes. He spoke of the day's affairs, of upcoming political negotiations, but his mind kept replaying the image of Elara's startled face and Seraphina's fleeting smile. Seraphina, oblivious to his internal shift, chattered on about her plans for decorating the Luna's solar, her voice a melodious hum. Yet, a disquieting edge now clung to her perfect composure. Elara herself couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that these accidents weren't merely unfortunate coincidences. Her footsteps, once light and unburdened, now carried a subtle tension. She found herself scanning her surroundings, a knot forming in her stomach whenever a shadow shifted or a door creaked unexpectedly. The most unsettling part was Lady Seraphina. Elara had caught her gaze on more than one occasion, a glint of something sharp, almost predatory in the noblewoman's eyes, quickly veiled whenever Elara met her stare. The following morning, Elara was meticulously dusting the intricate carvings on a mahogany armoire in the west wing. The silence of the morning was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of her duster. Suddenly, a small, metallic glint caught her eye. Near the base of the armoire, tucked partially under its ornate clawfoot, lay a small, razor-sharp letter opener, its silver blade catching the weak morning light. It was an unusual place for such an object, certainly not where it belonged. As she reached down to pick it up, a movement in the periphery of her vision made her freeze. Lady Seraphina, dressed in a flowing gown of emerald green, was emerging from the adjoining study, her gaze fixed on Elara. For a fraction of a second, Elara saw it, a quick, almost imperceptible flick of Seraphina's wrist, as if she had just released something. Then, Seraphina's eyes widened in feigned surprise, her hand fluttering to her chest. "Oh, Ilara, my dear, you startled me. What are you doing down there?" Seraphina's voice was sweet, perhaps a little too sweet. Ilara straightened, the chill of the metal against her fingertips mirroring the chill in her heart. "Just picking up this, my lady. It seems to have fallen." She held up the letter opener, its pointed tip glinting menacingly. Seraphina's eyes flickered to the blade, then back to Ilara's face. A thin, almost imperceptible line appeared between her perfectly sculpted brows. "Ah, yes. I must have dropped it earlier. How careless of me." She offered a saccharine smile, but her eyes held a different story. A story of cold calculation, of a danger barely concealed. The air in the room, once still, now crackled with an unspoken threat. Ilara felt a prickle of fear, a silent whisper in her mind that confirmed her growing suspicions. These were no accidents, a protective instinct. The scent of pine and damp earth usually brought Theron a sense of calm, but today, a subtle metallic tang cut through the familiar forest notes. He'd been on his way back from inspecting the perimeter guards when a faint whimper, almost swallowed by the rustling leaves, snagged his attention. It wasn't a sound of pain, not exactly, more like a choked gasp of frustration. He followed the faint echo, his alpha senses zeroing in. He found Ilara hunched over a stack of firewood near the edge of the servants' quarters, her small frame trembling. Her left hand was clutched in her right, blood seeping between her fingers, stark crimson against her pale skin. A jagged splinter of wood, still embedded in the log she had been carrying, glinted menacingly. "Ilara," he rumbled, his voice deeper than intended. She jumped, startled, her head snapping up. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met his, and he saw a flash of fear quickly masked by an attempt at composure. "Your Majesty!" She tried to curtsy, but the movement caused her to wince, her grip on her injured hand tightening. "Don't move," Theron commanded, striding closer. The sight of her blood, the vulnerable tremor in her shoulders, ignited a spark of something fierce and elemental within him. It was a protective instinct he hadn't felt so acutely since defending his younger sister from a rogue wolf as a pup. He knelt beside her, his large hand gently prying her fingers away to reveal a deep, ragged gash across her palm. "What happened?" "Just a loose nail, Your Majesty," she murmured, her gaze darting away from his, settling on the chipped wood of the shed behind them. "It must have caught on the log when I picked it up." Her voice was soft, but he detected a faint tremor of something akin to resignation beneath the feigned nonchalance. Theron's jaw tightened. A loose nail. The phrase echoed with an unsettling familiarity. The twisted ankle, the spilled hot tea, the near fall down the stone steps, all attributed to similar accidents. He remembered the bruise on her hip, the way she'd flinched when he'd offered to help her pick up scattered laundry. His previous dismissals of these incidents as mere clumsiness now felt like a grave oversight. A cold dread began to seep into his veins. "This is no, just a loose nail, Ilara," he said, his voice low, a dangerous edge to it. He carefully examined the wound, his brow furrowed. "This looks like a deliberate act." Her breath hitched. She finally met his gaze again, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and a dawning understanding. I don't know, Your Majesty." The lie was transparent. Theron felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at the unseen hand he was beginning to suspect was behind these misfortunes. Who would target such a gentle, unassuming soul? And why? Without another word, he gently took her uninjured arm. "Come. You need a healer, and this needs proper bandaging." He led her towards the infirmary, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions. His mind raced, replaying every minor mishap Ilara had endured since Seraphina's arrival. The pattern, once invisible, now shimmered with an ominous clarity. He had chosen Seraphina for her strength, her noble lineage, her perceived grace. Yet, A quiet, insistent voice in the back of his mind had always whispered a faint warning, a discordant note in the symphony of his decision. Now, that whisper had grown into a roar. He recalled the way Seraphina's eyes would linger on Alara, a possessive glint he had dismissed as mere curiosity. He remembered the subtle shift in the air, the way the other servants seemed to avoid Alara after Seraphina had passed by. By the time they reached the infirmary, his decision was made. He would not ignore this any longer. He would not stand by while Alara, or anyone else in his kingdom, was subjected to such veiled cruelty. He would start with Seraphina. He needed to know everything about her past, every detail, every rumor. This feeling, this burning need to protect Alara was too strong to be dismissed. It was more than a king's duty. It was a primal, gut-wrenching imperative. And if his suspicions proved correct, his choice for Luna would have dire consequences for them all. He would uncover the truth, no matter how unsettling. Shadows of the past. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth as Theron strode through the training grounds, the rhythmic thud of practice swords echoing from the distant arena. He should have felt a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction in the aftermath of his decision. Yet, a restless unease gnawed at him, a discordant note in the symphony of his meticulously ordered life. The image of Seraphina, triumphant and radiant, flickered in his mind, only to be swiftly supplanted by a fleeting glimpse of Alara's wide, startled eyes. He pushed the latter image away, a silent reprimand for his wandering thoughts. His investigation into Seraphina's past had begun subtly, a series of casual inquiries to the elder members of the court, particularly those who had served his father during their childhoods. He sought out the nannies, the stable hands, the forgotten figures who often saw the true faces behind the masks of nobility. What he unearthed was a disquieting tapestry of whispers and veiled recollections. Old Beryl, a former seamstress now living in quiet retirement, had spoken of a mischievous glint in young Seraphina's eyes, a cleverness that often veered into cruelty. She'd tie the stable boy's shoelaces together, Beryl had recounted, her voice a reedy whisper, then trip him herself, blaming the uneven ground. And those poor birds, she had a way of rescuing them from their nests, only to forget about them in a day or two. Another, an elderly groundskeeper with gnarled hands, recalled a particularly vicious prank involving a prized flower bed and a rival's pet rabbit. The rabbit was fine, he'd grumbled, adjusting his spectacles, but the other girl's tears. Seraphina watched, impassive as ice, as if observing an interesting experiment. The anecdotes painted a picture of a child who enjoyed exerting power, who savoured the discomfort of others, and who possessed a chilling ability to detach herself from the consequences of her actions. These weren't the playful mischief of a spirited child. They were calculated, often cruel, acts. Each story, seemingly insignificant on its own, became another thread in a burgeoning web of suspicion. His initial doubt, a quiet hum beneath the surface of his certainty, now solidified into a tangible presence. The unsettling feeling he'd dismissed as pre-lunar jitters now felt like a warning, a primal instinct screaming at him from the depths of his wolf. He was in his study, poring over ancient treaties, when the door opened with a soft click. Seraphina entered, a vision in emerald green, her movements fluid and graceful. The scent of jasmine and rose water wafted into the room, a stark contrast to the musty smell of old parchment. "Theron, my love," she purred, her voice a velvet caress. "You've been so distant today. Is everything all right?" He looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "Just a busy day, Seraphina. Affairs of state, as always." He noted the faint crease between her brows, the subtle tightening around her mouth, signs of annoyance barely concealed beneath her practiced smile. She was accustomed to immediate attention, to being the center of every room she entered. She glided across the polished floorboards, her hand reaching for his arm. Her touch was light, possessive. "You work too hard. Come, let me distract you. Perhaps a walk in the gardens. The moon will be full tonight. It promises to be beautiful." Her eyes, usually sparkling with ambition, softened, attempting to convey warmth, tenderness. It was a well-rehearsed performance, flawless in its execution, designed to charm and disarm. He felt the pressure of her fingers, the faint warmth of her palm, and a shiver, not of pleasure, but of something akin to revulsion, traced its way down his spine. The stories of the lost birds, the tripped stable boy, the impassive gaze, they all coalesced, tainting the sweetness of her smile, the allure of her beauty. He saw not the radiant Luna-to-be, but the cunning child who revelled in others' pain. "Perhaps later, Serafina," he said, his voice even, betraying none of the turmoil within him. He gently disengaged his arm. "I have a few more matters to attend to before I can truly relax." A flicker of irritation crossed her face, quickly veiled. "As you wish, my Alpha," she replied, her tone still honeyed, but with a subtle edge of frustration. She lingered for a moment, her gaze searching his, as if trying to decipher the unreadable mask he wore. Failing, she turned, her exit as graceful as her entrance, leaving behind the lingering scent of jasmine and the chilling echoes of childish cruelty. Theron leaned back in his chair, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. His suspicion had solidified into conviction. The woman he had chosen as his Luna was not who she seemed, and the truth, he now realized with a cold certainty, was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The hidden warning. The scent of aged parchment and polished oak filled Ilara's nostrils as she moved through Alpha King Theron's private study. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight slicing through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the meticulous order of the room. It was a space that spoke of quiet power, of countless hours spent poring over treaties and ancient texts. Her task was simple: a thorough cleaning, a privilege usually reserved for the most trusted household staff. But lately, Theron's personal guard had taken to escorting her here, their gazes lingering with an unusual intensity. She ran a feather duster over the spines of leather-bound books, her movements precise and practiced, each stroke a whisper against the silence. She reached the massive, intricately carved desk, its surface gleaming like dark water. Theron was particular about his workspace, every quill and inkpot arranged with military precision, but today, something was out of place. Tucked beneath a heavy silver inkwell, a corner of aged vellum peeked out, barely visible. Curiosity, a dangerous companion in a place like this, pricked at her. Her heart gave a small, nervous flutter. Against her better judgment, she hesitated, then her fingers, slim and quick, retrieved the item. It was a letter, folded and creased, the paper brittle with age. The script, a bold, flourishing hand, was unfamiliar, yet strangely captivating. Her eyes, wide and startled, scanned the opening lines. "To my beloved Theron, my Alpha, may this message find you well." It was from advisor Gareth, a name whispered with reverence even now, years after his passing. He had been Theron's mentor, a man renowned for his wisdom and unwavering loyalty. Ilara's gaze raced over the words, each one a sharp jab to her growing unease. Gareth's tone was urgent, almost frantic, detailing concerns about a rising noble family, the House of Valerius. He spoke of their insatiable ambition, their carefully constructed facade of loyalty. Then, a name leaped out, striking her with the force of a physical blow. Seraphina. My king, the letter continued. The ink faded in places, but the message starkly clear. I implore you, exercise utmost caution. Lady Seraphina Valerius, while possessing undeniable charm and beauty, carries a darkness within her very lineage. Her family's influence is a venom slowly seeping into the heart of our court. Her smiles are daggers, her promises, silken traps. Do not be swayed by her allure, for it masks a cunning, manipulative spirit. She seeks power, not partnership. This is not the Luna our pact deserves, nor the companion you need. Ilara's breath hitched. A cold dread seeped into her bones, chilling her to the core. This was more than just an old warning. It was a revelation, painting a portrait of the future Luna, so starkly different from the demure, elegant woman Theron had chosen. She thought of Theron, his usually steadfast gaze holding a quiet doubt whenever Seraphina was near. She remembered the way his eyes, when they occasionally met hers across the great hall, held a strange, unsettling pang, as if searching for something he couldn't name. The letter crinkled softly in her trembling fingers. Gareth had underlined a phrase. Look beyond the gilded cage, my king. True strength lies not in outward show, but in purity of heart and unwavering spirit. A sudden clang from the hallway shattered the quiet, sending a jolt through Ilara. Footsteps approached, heavy and purposeful. Panic seized her. She couldn't be found with this. Not now. Not ever. With a desperate flicker of thought, she folded the letter precisely, tucking it back into its hidden alcove beneath the inkwell. Her hands, despite their tremor, worked quickly, ensuring no trace remained. She smoothed the surface of the desk, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The study door creaked open. It was Theron. His eyes, the color of molten gold, swept over the room, then landed on her. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his features. Surprise? Recognition. He hadn't expected her to be here alone. Ilara, he said, his voice a deep rumble that usually brought comfort, but now sent shivers down her spine. What are you doing here? She curtsied, her gaze fixed on the polished floorboards, her mind racing, the words of the old advisor echoing in her ears. The warning was real, the danger undeniable, the truth unveiled. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of Theron's study. The parchment, still warm from her grasp, felt like a live thing, buzzing with dangerous secrets. Theron, seated at his heavy oak desk, looked up from the ledger he was studying, his gaze, usually so sharp, softening almost imperceptibly as it met hers. He had a quiet doubt, a subtle unease about Seraphina that Ilara, despite her lowly station, had keenly observed. Now, a strange, unsettling pang touched his features as he noticed the tremor in her hands. Ilara? Is something amiss? His voice was a low rumble, concern etched onto his brow. She swallowed, the dryness in her throat making speech difficult. Her fingers, slick with nervous perspiration, struggled to unroll the letter. Alpha King, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I found this while cleaning. She extended the aged parchment, the seal of the Valerius house stark against its yellowed surface. Theron's eyes narrowed, shifting from Ilara's pale face to the document. He took it, his strong fingers carefully unrolling the tightly bound letter. As he read, the subtle shift in his expression was profound. The initial confusion gave way to a cold, hard anger that radiated from him, making the air in the room crackle. He reread a particular passage, his jaw tightening. The funds diverted to the border patrols, the false reports of rogue activity, all designed to create instability and justify Seraphina's proposed solutions within the High Council. He looked up, his gaze piercing Ilara's. This implicates her directly. and it paints a target on anyone who might expose it. The full weight of her discovery, and the danger she had unknowingly stumbled into, crashed over Alara. Theron, seeing the dawning fear in her eyes, rose abruptly, circling the desk to stand before her. His hand, surprisingly gentle, cupped her chin, tilting her face up. "You are in danger, Alara. Grave danger. She would not hesitate to silence you." The realization was a raw wound, exposing not just Seraphina's treachery but the very real threat to Alara's life. His quiet doubt about Seraphina solidified into an undeniable certainty, laced with a bitter regret for his blindness. Later that evening, the grand dining hall, usually a bastion of boisterous camaraderie, was steeped in an unnerving silence. Theron had dismissed the guards, leaving only Seraphina, resplendent in a sapphire gown, and himself. The air between them was thick with unspoken accusations. "Seraphina," Theron began, his voice devoid of warmth, "we need to discuss something." He laid the letter on the polished mahogany table between them, its presence a stark accusation. Seraphina's perfect smile faltered, her eyes darting to the parchment. A flicker of something dark, panic, quickly masked by disdain, crossed her features. "What is this, my Alpha? Some old family ledger?" Her voice was airy, dismissive, but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. "This," Theron stated, tapping the letter with a rigid finger, "is a communication from your father, detailing a scheme to manipulate the High Council through fabricated threats and diverted resources. It speaks of ensuring my chosen Luna would have undisputed power, even if it meant undermining my own authority." His eyes, once full of a quiet affection for her, were now obsidian chips of ice. It also makes clear that any who stood in the way, or discovered this, would be removed. The facade crumbled. Seraphina's lips, previously set in a soft curve, twisted into a snarl. Her eyes, usually sparkling with feigned sweetness, blazed with a fierce emerald fury. "And what if it is? What if I merely wish to ensure our reign is absolute, Theron? Is that not what a true Luna desires?" Her voice rose, shrill and venomous. "You were too blind, too weak to see the opportunities. And that little maid, she dared to meddle where she didn't belong." Her gaze, burning with a jealous hatred, fixed on Theron. "She was always looking at you, always trying to catch your eye. A common servant, she deserved whatever came to her for her audacity." The admission hung in the air, thick with malice. The elegant Lady Seraphina was gone, replaced by a creature of raw, unbridled rage. Theron stared, a profound disgust washing over him. The image of Alara's trembling hands, her fear, solidified into an unshakable resolve. His choice, he now saw with chilling clarity, had been a catastrophic mistake, nearly costing him more than just his throne. "You reveal your true self, Seraphina," Theron said, his voice a low growl that vibrated with suppressed power. "And the truth, it seems, is far more monstrous than I could have ever imagined. A king's new choice." The air in the grand hall crackled with an almost unbearable anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy silence. Theron stood on the raised dais, Seraphina beside him, her hand resting delicately on his forearm, a possessive smile playing on her lips. Below them, the assembled nobility and pack members held their breaths, waiting for the king's final decree. A hush had fallen, so profound that the rustle of a silk gown or the shifting of a nervous foot sounded like a thunderclap. Theron cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the hall's acoustics. "My people!" His voice resonated, deep and commanding. "We gather today to finalize a choice of great import for our kingdom, a choice that would usher in a new era, a new Luna. Seraphina preened, her chin lifting slightly, a triumphant gleam in her emerald eyes. She had won. Everyone knew it. Then, Theron's gaze swept across the crowd, a flicker of something unreadable in his sapphire eyes. He paused, his focus settling on a small figure near the back, partially obscured by a column. Ilara. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. A quiet strength emanated from her, even from that distance. A jolt, sharp and unexpected, ran through Theron. He turned back to Seraphina, but the warmth had drained from his expression. However, he continued, his voice now edged with a cold steel that sent a shiver through the assembly. A choice founded on deception is no choice at all. Seraphina's triumphant smile faltered. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. "Lady Seraphina Valerius," Theron's voice boomed, cutting through the rising whispers like a blade, "you stand accused of grave deceit, of manipulating the royal selection, of conspiring against a fellow participant, and of concealing vital information that would have irrevocably altered the course of this courtship." Seraphina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her face, moments ago radiant with pride, now paled to a ghastly white. "My king! What? Silence!" Theron's voice was a roar, the raw power of his alpha command shaking the very foundations of the hall. Guards, until now standing at ease, snapped to attention, their hands instinctively moving to the hilts of their swords. "The letter, Seraphina. The one addressed to Lord Kalin, discovered secreted within your private chambers. The one detailing your malicious intent towards Ilara. Your plans to discredit and endanger her." A collective gasp swept through the hall. Seraphina's eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape, for a denial, but found none. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the raw fear beneath. "It's a lie, a forgery," she shrieked, her voice thin and desperate. "The script matches your own, Seraphina, and the scent of your deceit clings to it like a shroud." Theron's voice was laced with disgust. "Effective immediately, I cancel the royal selection. And Lady Seraphina Valerius, you are stripped of all titles and privileges. You will be held under guard until a full investigation into your treasonous actions can be concluded." 2 hulking guards stepped forward, their expressions grim, and grasped Seraphina's arms. She struggled, a strangled cry escaping her lips, but their grip was unyielding. The hall erupted into a cacophony of shocked exclamations and bewildered whispers. Theron held up a hand, and silence, though still buzzing with residual shock, returned. His gaze, now softer but no less intense, once again found Ilara. He descended the dais, his powerful stride purposeful, cutting a path through the stunned onlookers. Every eye in the hall followed him, their confusion deepening with each step. He stopped before Ilara, who stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The danger had passed, but the enormity of the moment threatened to overwhelm her. Theron reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. "Ilara," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate tone that seemed to cut out all other sound. "I was blind, deceived by outward appearances, by what I thought I wanted. But you showed me what true courage is, what genuine kindness looks like. You stood firm, even when facing unimaginable threat." He searched her eyes, his own filled with a raw, undeniable emotion. "I cannot explain the connection I feel to you, the way my wolf stirs in your presence, the way you have quietly, unknowingly captured my heart." A tear tracked a path down Ilara's cheek. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. "I know this is sudden, unexpected," Theron continued, his thumb gently stroking her skin, "but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You possess the strength, the grace, and the purity of spirit that our kingdom needs. You are the true Luna of my heart, the woman I was always meant to find." He knelt, right there in the midst of his stunned court, an unprecedented act for an Alpha King. "Ilara, will you be my queen? Will you stand by my side and help me lead our people with integrity and truth?" The hall remained utterly silent, the entire world seeming to hold its breath, waiting for Ilara's answer. A rain of truth, a primal roar, deep and rich, thundered from the assembled multitude. Not a cry of rage, but a surge of pure, unbridled jubilation. Theron, his shoulders still quivering from the weight of his confession, felt the sound vibrate through the ancient stones of the courtyard. He'd braced for outrage, perhaps even rebellion. Instead, an exhilarating wave of euphoria washed over him. He turned to Ilara, whose features, moments ago etched with disbelief, now reflected a blossoming wonder. Her eyes, the hue of a summer sky just before a storm, met his, revealing not only surprise but a flicker of something he dared to hope was relief. The cheers swelled, coalescing into a rhythmic chant. "Ilara! Ilara!" This sound, once a distant echo of his kingdom's expectations, now felt like a warm, embracing current. Theron reached for her hand, his fingers weaving with hers. Her skin, usually cool and reserved, was now feverishly warm against his. He squeezed gently, a silent pact passing between them. Ilara, once the quiet servant who drifted through the castle's shadows, now stood bathed in the full brilliance of the afternoon sun. Her simple tunic seemed to radiate light, the faint dusting of flour that typically clung to her hair replaced by an ethereal glow. Her shoulders, often bearing the invisible burden of her low station, were now held high, imbued with an unexpected resilience. No longer a timid presence, she was a beacon, drawing every gaze. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as Theron, with an almost imperceptible nod, signalled for the royal tailor. A hushed reverence descended as a cloak of shimmering silver blue, emblazoned with the Alpha King's crest, was draped over Ilara's shoulders. The fabric, soft as spun moonlight, settled around her, instantly transforming her. She looked less like a servant and more like the queen she was destined to be. A collective gasp, then a renewed torrent of applause, swept through the throng. Ilara, overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight, felt her heart pound against her ribs. The substantial weight of the cloak, the scrutiny of thousands, the sheer magnitude of the moment, threatened to buckle her knees. Yet, when she looked at Theron, his hand still firmly clasped in hers, a profound calm settled over her. His eyes, once clouded by doubt and veiled by another's deception, now shone with clear, unwavering conviction. It was a gaze that promised sanctuary, devotion, and a future built on veracity. Theron, drawing Ilara nearer, addressed his people, his voice resonating with newfound authority and conviction. "My people," he boomed, his voice carrying to the furthest corners of the courtyard. "You have witnessed a grave error, and now you bear witness to its rectification. Ilara, by her strength, her courage, and her undeniable truth, stands here as my chosen queen. Together, we will forge a reign not of artifice and ambition, but of compassion, justice, and unwavering honesty." His words were met with another deafening cheer. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, a sense of rebirth and renewal. This was not merely the selection of a queen, it was the genesis of a new era. As the cheer subsided, Theron turned to Ilara again, his gaze softening. "My queen," he murmured, his voice for her alone. "Are you ready to face this future with me?" Ilara, her breath catching, met his gaze. Fear still lingered, a tiny tremor beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a fierce resolve. The injustices she had witnessed, the silent suffering she had endured, all fueled a burning desire to create a better world. "I am ready, my king," she replied. Her voice, though still soft, carried a new, resonant strength. "I am ready to rule with you, with truth as our guide and compassion as our light." Theron smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. He lifted her hand, not to his lips as he might have done for a noble, but to his chest, pressing her palm against the steady beat of his heart. In that simple gesture, a silent vow was exchanged. The future of the kingdom, once shrouded in deceit, now stretched before them, bright and unyielding, a testament to a truth finally unearthed. The reign of Alara and Theron had begun.